This is Head On here on Shaw TV. I'm Hilary Eastmure, sitting in for host Ian Holmes. And today, as always, we'll take a closer look at the issues that really matter here on Mid-Vancouver Island. The federal government recently announced funding for projects aimed at preventing violence against women and girls, specifically projects involving strong community partnerships. And in this area, we have several organizations that are already working together on that very issue. And today, I'm joined by two guests who are working on the proverbial front lines of helping women in need in our community. Constable Shannon Kitchen, you are the Nanaimo RCMP Domestic Violence Investigator. Sally Fendick, you are the Program Coordinator for Community Victim Services with Haven Society. And together you helped launch Nanaimo's Domestic Violence Unit. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having us.
First off, let's talk a little bit about the degree of seriousness in this area in terms of the number of women in crisis, the number of calls related to domestic violence to Nanaimo RCMP.
Domestic violence in this community, the RCMP have been responding to numerous complaints. When we look at numbers, I mean, I don't have specific when it comes to direct numbers, but we're looking at least 1,000 a year that we're attending to.
Wow. And Sally, in terms of the demand for the numerous services provided by Haven Society, and that's in Nanaimo right up to Parksville, Qualicum, tell me in 2014, how many women reached out for help?
Well, I was looking at the stats today. At Haven Society, about 5,000 people tried to access services at Haven Society. We have a lot of different programs, so not only in Nanaimo, but in Parksville. And I just want you to know, actually, that in the transition house, that's mostly kids.
Right, so it's women bringing their children with them when they're trying to escape an abusive situation?
That's right, yeah.
Okay.
In my own program in Community Victim Services, we have about 800 clients a year accessing services. And that works out to about 250 in a month. And about half of those are involved with family law. Only a quarter of my clients, my files, are actually involved with the criminal justice system.
Okay, so there's the calls to RCMP, but then there's an underlying number of women who reach out for help that doesn't involve legal services at all.
That's right.
Wow. And I think for a lot of people, they don't realize that domestic violence is as prevalent as it is. It's kind of, below the surface. And it's the victims who, maybe don't feel comfortable reaching out for help. And, it's just kind of undercover.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so tell me a little bit about Nanaimo's Domestic Violence Unit, because it's a pretty unique program. This is something that does exist in other areas, but Nanaimo's is special because it's co-located. Shannon, tell me what that means.
It means that my actual office as the RCMP officer in this unit, I'm actually co-located and I have an office at the Haven Society. Generally, when we're looking at domestic violence units, they're actually located within a detachment or police station, and so social workers and the police members are working together within that detachment or police station. In this case, I'm going to be half my time is spent at the Haven Society in an office, so co-locating there, and that's something that's very different from anywhere else.
Sally, what's the benefit of working together through community partnerships to address women in crisis and domestic violence?
Well, specifically to the Domestic Violence Unit, we're kind of a special partnership because there's only 7 of us in the province, and it's an integrated domestic violence unit, which means it's specific that there would be a domestic violence investigator from the RCMP in partnership with a community victim services worker. Right? So only 7 in the province. And that's because the community victim services workers are specially trained to navigate the criminal justice system. But furthermore, we don't have an obligation to report crime. So the victim can come to us and talk about things they don't really want the police to know about. And long as life and limb aren't at risk, then the police don't have to know everything. They just need to know about life and limb and if there's escalating abuse happening.
Okay. And so how does the domestic violence unit work? Like, is it every call that comes in that's domestic violence related? Are you simply responding to calls, or what are the steps?
Right now, my mandate and what happens for me is I'm the only one from the detachment that is doing this particular job.
Okay.
And what is required is that our members will notify me of an incident that they've responded to. So it doesn't necessarily even have to be an assault. It could be any range of incidents that they have attended to. And if it's involving a family, then I actually get notified with that incident, and I take a look at it. And I'm able then to look at background. I'm able to look at sort of risk assess what's happening, and even take a look further, maybe even delve further into the situation, and maybe even look at other files in other jurisdictions to see whether or not there's something else that's under the surface. And if I am able to identify possibly something that's high risk, then I'm also then engaging with Sally to then take a further look at what's going on and addressing things and doing that risk assessment, and possibly moving forward with, having a little bit more access to them and trying to engage them into our services.
And I think some people maybe have the impression that by just responding to incidents of domestic violence, there's not really an aspect of prevention there. But I think that is a really key part of the work that you're doing, right?
Precisely. I mean, I do have my frontline workers who are going to all of these calls, and so sometimes they will know as soon as they get there that this is something that needs to basically a higher level of risk assessing, and they will either send me a message or notify me and say this needs a little bit more to address the situation. And so beyond, sometimes those do go beyond just that first response to our members going there. And then other times I'm notified, so I'm keeping a track of how many calls I'm getting, and who exactly it is that I am dealing with. Because sometimes we do have that repetitive situation. It may not necessarily come in first as an assault. It may come in as just an argument, and then we're progressing, and I'm able to see the escalation. And so then being able to do that prevention work and get the services necessary there, so we're maybe preventing an assault.
Right, and so when we're talking about victim services then, what sort of resources are available to women who've experienced assaults, sexual violence, or any other sort of domestic violence related incident?
In some ways, we're very fortunate in Nanaimo because we have a lot of resources. In Haven Society alone, we have the Community Victim Services, we have the Women's Counseling Program, we have Children Who Witness Abuse, we have an outreach program, not only in Nanaimo, but also in Parksville. There's a safe house in Parksville, there's outreach in Parksville, Community Victim Services. In Nanaimo, we have the Transition House. And then we have other community members that are contributing as resources, like the Justice Access Center for families that are having trouble around separation and needing the courts to be involved, civil matters like custody and access. Right?
Right, because I can imagine navigating the legal system, especially when you're in crisis like that, must be nearly impossible.
Yeah, it's really difficult. But there's other things like the Immigrant Welcome Center, the Multicultural Society, actually they're called the Central Vancouver Island Multicultural Society.
Right.
We also have like the Forensic Nurse Examiner team that are part of the resources for us, and police victim services workers, and
right, so you're saying there is a very strong community network of resources working to prevent violence against women?
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, and these individual services, I mean, it's been several years now that they identified the issues in this community and have on a monthly basis been meeting all together in trying to move forward in what kinds of things and trying to get that service blanketed so that we are not having things fall through the cracks or having gaps in service, and trying to make sure that everybody's on the same page and that we are aware of the individuals that we're dealing with. And so we're not duplicating service, we're actually then working together and communicating to make sure we're all moving forward with a case that we might have at hand. Absolutely.
So in creating this domestic violence unit in Nanaimo, that's obviously years of work that went into creating that, to lay the groundwork for that. So it's resources from Nanaimo RCMP and Haven Society. Is there anything else that comes into play with that unit?
Yes, actually, if there's children involved, then we would notify the RCMP would notify the Ministry of Children and Family Development. and other service providers, depending on how much danger the family is in. If we determine that there's a higher risk, like highest risk, then we'll start communicating with other service providers that are directly associated with that family, and we'll invite them in to kind of strategize together. So we'll share information with the clients, with the victim's consent, and in most cases, we do our best so that we have her consent. Mm-hmm. And then we'll share the risk indicators so that we can create a plausible scenario and that would be about safety, so that we can figure out some strategies and options and then offer those options to the family. And I would work closely with the client, and Shannon would work closely with the offender.
Okay, very interesting to hear the work that the Domestic Violence Unit is doing. We're going to take a quick break here, and we'll come back and talk about some of the challenges when it comes to dealing with violence against women. Welcome back to Head On here on Shaw TV. We're talking preventing violence against women. Sally Fendick, you're the Community Victim Services Coordinator with Haven Society. Constable Shannon Kitchen heading up Nanaimo's Domestic Violence Unit. Violence against women is something that's a really hot topic right now. Obviously, we have calls for a national inquiry into Canada's missing and murdered Indigenous women. We have International Women's Day coming up March 8th, and we also have a movie in theaters right now, 50 Shades of Domestic Violence. So, I mean, this is something that that gets talked about a lot, but at the same time, it's also happening below the surface in our very own community. Sally, you were saying about 5,000 calls to Haven Society last year in terms of requests for services, and the domestic violence calls to Nanaimo RCMP, you said about at least 1,000. So let's talk about some of the challenges when we're trying to address preventing violence against women. Obviously, great resources available, but you run into some roadblocks, of course. Sally, tell me what you're up against.
Well, we're doing a lot to try to address the things that are already happening. I'm afraid there's just not enough funding. There's not enough funding to provide prevention. Like, we need more staff. We need more RCMP. It's not even fair that it's just one domestic violence investigator in our community. We are run ragged. I'm working many, many hours. And we don't have enough funding for education.
Mm-hmm. Just to even get the word out about what is available?
Yes, and to inform the public, to be aware of how prevalent, and so that people could have more of an analysis and be more supportive and recognize when they're being abused, and recognizing escalation, and even knowing about that they can call Haven Society or access a specialized RCMP like Shannon.
Okay, and exactly, you're just one person trying to head up all of these domestic violence related calls. That must be a lot of pressure.
I mean, it is a lot of pressure, and I mean, we are fortunate because I do have Sally as a team, and I think that's different because that's just recently changed. This relationship that we've created. I mean, I just got into the position in December, and so, you know, I'm able to then really look to Sally's team for support, and I also do have the support of my serious crimes unit. So when I am not available, I do have other people that I can lean on, but it definitely needs to be addressed when it comes to what kind of resources that we do have, and I know that everywhere, you know, when it comes to resources, they're really tight, and so we would really it's going to be a necessity for us to take a look at what we have and really, you know, when it comes to being able to get those resources in place, really show what we have and what we're doing, and then be able to possibly be able to pull in some more resources and some more assistance, and, you know, really and truly make those applications for these different grants with regards to, you know, our prevention aspects, right, that we have going on right now. So then we have that funding and putting forward those things, but we don't necessarily get the funding, but we have to, you know, really start putting those applications forward.
Exactly. Through the Ministry for the Status of Women, they announced some funding for community-based projects, but then you have to go after that funding. You have to write those grant applications, and, you know, when you're already so thinly stretched trying to provide the services that you do, where do you find the time to write these and jump through the federal government's hoops, right? Yeah. And do you get consistent funding?
you know, it's always a little bit scary, isn't it? Yeah, but we do have core funding. Community Victim Services has been something that's been provided by the Ministry of Justice and its predecessors for years and years. Yeah.
Okay. And through the domestic violence unit, you were talking about support like legal services, domestic violence court?
Yes.
Well, we're very fortunate because we have this community of service providers that are fairly frontline, that really understand what's going on in the community, right, in regards to domestic violence. So we came together a few years ago and thought that it might be really good for us if we had a designated domestic violence court. And so thanks to people like Jackie Gaudette, who's Crown Counsel in our community, she basically took that on. And we now have a K court, what's called a K court, that's domestic violence court. So it's all the, you know, first time that they come up to a court, individuals.
First appearance.
Okay.
We have them concentrated every second Thursday so that all the service providers that can be there will be there. So there's resources right in the courthouse, and it's the same Crown Counsel working with the files, and there's an attitude of kind of like a therapeutic court, and that's really unusual, so that we're not everybody's going into jail right away. They're actually they have some options like counseling and men's groups.
So almost like a restorative justice take on it?
Yeah, like an alternative kind of, yeah.
Huh.
Alternative measures, kind of.
Right.
Yeah.
And that is a luxury to be able to provide that.
Yeah.
And that's because this community has those services and the support, and they've been developing them, developing services and different counseling programs that are for the men. And you know, and we're still developing those to the point now where they are so successful, as what we're looking at, that they're full, and that we're needing to even provide more, because these courses are actually quite lengthy, and these are the things that are provided and offered to be able to go into in that first instance that we're hitting the court. So in that first appearance, these things are there, these services are there, and really, we're trying to, when we do have these investigations and dealing with domestic violence, getting these incidents before the court. So if we're looking at charges and charge approval, we would actually get them before the court within that 2-week period of time from the incident to court. So a very quick turnaround. And in doing so, really get to engage with not only the victim, but also the offender. And it seems to be being very positive when it comes to then getting them engaged in some of these services and being very proactive in that prevention aspects. Because a lot of times the reality is we're dealing with relationships that are not separating. They're not going to be stopped at this point. They are actually going to continue, and they're going to get back together. So then providing those services to have healthier relationships.
Right, so you don't get stuck in the same cycle over and over again.
Exactly.
Okay, but you're saying there needs to be more resources available to help, you know, the couples in that type of relationship. I don't want to call it the root cause, but you know, it's that pattern of behavior and addressing that before it gets to the point where you are in the court system or you know, looking for alternative housing. Yeah. Right.
And we do have a lot of resources, but the wait lists are incredible.
Are they?
Oh, yeah, yeah. With the Women's Counseling Program has a huge wait list to get into the therapeutic portion of the services that are available. And, you know, often we phone the transition house and it's full. And we don't have enough second stage housing in our community. And we have all kinds of mental health issues and addiction issues, and I wish there was more funding in those areas as well, so that those things that individuals do to cope with their lives need support so that that wouldn't happen anymore. Yeah.
Are there challenges that are unique to Nanaimo, or are those things that, you know, happen in all communities?
You know, I'm sure that I know that domestic violence happens in all communities all over the world. But in our community, we have little islands, you know, so someone has to like kayak from Mudge Island to perhaps Duke Point so that they could get and hitchhike to Nanaimo to access services, or often Whiskey Creek and that kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So women living in isolated areas, not necessarily with that easy access to help. Okay, that makes sense. What can we do now to start addressing violence prevention more effectively?
Actually, I think talking about it and doing your own research. And, you know, it's totally possible to donate. We need the donations. That's fundamental. And the volunteers. So donating your time as well as your resources. And I think caring about each other, you know. We all know someone that's being impacted by domestic violence. And to look at that family with some care and concern and good boundaries, and instead of looking to blame someone. It's not helpful to blame.
Right, so at least being supportive, letting people know what sort of resources are available, not necessarily just making the call to 911 when, you know, it's really hitting the fan, but being proactive about it?
Yeah.
Okay.
And calling 911 is important. That could save lives.
Yes.
Really? I think some people get intimidated to pick up the phone and call police. They don't want to get involved, you know? You don't want to be the one to instigate police involvement in something. Shannon, what would you say to that?
You know, it's one of those things that I would feel so terrible that something's happening and I'm hearing things going on and I don't make that call and something very bad happens. When we talked to a lot of people, we're saying we're going to err on the side of caution. If we can intervene when it is only an argument, you know, and we're not dealing with having someone carted off to hospital. You know, if we can intervene at that first time and deal with it. And we are getting calls because, you know, this used to be a subject that didn't get any attention whatsoever. It was thought of as a family problem and nobody would ever call the police. And the police dealt with this in a very different manner as well. So, you know, as for the 20 years that I've been a police officer, this has been a priority. You know, a national priority for a very long time. It's been one of those things. I can remember the training that I received from day one, very specific, and it was, you know, we need to do more, and whether it be education and getting in, and I know that because I'm originally from Nanaimo and knowing people, starting to maybe get the word out a little bit differently, and possibly even, you know, getting to the schools, getting to those places where, you know, there are relationships happening at the beginning. And getting maybe some healthy type role models happening for our young people, so that we're not necessarily dealing with it and reacting to it, but we're actually preventing by doing those, you know, educational things in our schools, as well as then, you know, getting that first call of an argument instead of dealing with the actual violence at the end of it. So really encouraging people, because we're not carting somebody off to jail. We are looking at this very differently, and looking at putting services and getting things healthy and safe and reducing the risk. And we're not looking to throw anybody away in jail that way.
Right, it's why we have all of these supportive resources available through the community. We're almost out of time here. Sally, do you have any final comments you'd like to share?
Just, you know, mostly I'm really concerned about safety. I want Nanaimo to be a safer place to live. I think that we both do, you know? Yeah.
Okay. And like you said, all just caring about each other a little bit more, being a little more observant about your community, and knowing the resources that are out there. Shannon, any final comments?
Right now I'm in like the 2.5 month mark of doing this position, and I'm really excited about, you know, the progress that we're making, and I'm looking forward to what we are going to be able to accomplish, because I think it's going to be very good, and I think that we're going to probably be able to provide Nanaimo with a lot more in the future, and making sure that this is going to be a safer community.
Amazing.
We're a good team.
You guys are a great team. Well, obviously some amazing work being done here in Nanaimo to prevent violence against women and girls. Thank you both so much for joining me today. This has been another edition of Head On here on Shaw TV. Ian Holmes will be back for the next edition, exploring the issues that really matter here on Mid-Vancouver Island. Bam.